So the first thing that happened when we went to India was that the godbrothers of Prabhupada began to criticize that he has women in his party. Women are traveling with him, and they said he's a sannyasi, he shouldn't have women in his program. And he was initiating these women, giving them Brahminical initiation. They were engaged in doing pujari work, cooking, this and that and the other. So many of the godbrothers of Prabhupada criticized. They said, this is bogus, we shouldn't have women in these programs. I think they didn't have women in their temples, I'm not sure, but it seems to me like a lot of them were vehemently opposed to the idea that women would be part of a traveling group of devotees. And one of the disciples of Prabhupada's godbrother, his name was Yati Maharaj, he went to the media to complain that Prabhupada had women on his program. So Prabhupada went to the same newspaper, this was in Madras, and he said, well, yeah, I have women in my program, but every year Swami Yati is dancing in front of the widows. So Prabhupada made fun of this guy. But anyway, so Prabhupada was very liberal with allowing women into his society and allowing them to travel, allowing them to be initiated. He was, at least compared to other Gaudiya groups, he was very, encouraging of women to be part of that program. So the godbrothers, they were not happy with that, and Himavati went to Sridhar Maharaj's temple in Mayapur, and she came back from there crying, and Prabhupada says, what is the problem? And she said, well, Sridhar Maharaj's people, they were all criticizing that you're the guru of the hippies, and you're allowing women, and you're doing so many things which is not authorized, and no bona fide Brahmin would accept your teachings. So Prabhupada says, well, we shouldn't go there. No one should go to his temple, and no one went after that. So it's very ironic that after Prabhupada left, and after Prabhupada had said, I want to suspend sannyas, sannyas is not working, let's suspend that program, let's make grihastas, what happened instead, the GBC leaders of ISKCON went to the Gaudiya Math, the very same Gaudiya Math people who were very critical of Prabhupada. And sure enough, the Gaudiya Math people put the kibosh on Prabhupada's idea of having Varnashrama Dharma based on householders. And they reversed that, and we started generating a whole bunch more of sannyasis. After Prabhupada had just said, sannyas is not working, we shouldn't have more sannyasis. Instead, the GBC, with the encouragement of these godbrothers, started making a huge pile of sannyasis. And worse, they said these sannyasis are also gurus at the same time. So this put the whole program of Varnashrama Dharma and householders and incorporating women and families more into the society. That this whole program was put on hold while this false renunciation program, the false sannyasi program, became more and more prominent and eventually kind of overtook the society. The Varnashram program, no one was talking about it. Everyone was talking about the sannyasis and the guru program. And the godbrothers of Prabhupada who were helping and participating with that program. So that overshadowed Prabhupada's plan to have Varnashrama based on householders and incorporating women more into the society. So in Vedic society, the Brahmanas, the women, the children, the cows, they are protected. But what happened in ISKCON, the Brahmanas were all booted out almost wholesale, like Yasodhanandan, Pradyumna, many others like that. And they were taken away from their positions of teaching in the Gurukula system. And that turned out to be a total disaster. And in Berkeley, there was only 3 Prabhupada devotees left in the Berkeley Temple by 1985. Hansadutta removed all the Brahmanas. There were several hundred devotees living in the Berkeley community. They were all booted out, including many women, just booted out the door because they didn't want to protect the Brahmins. They didn't even want to have the Brahmins. So what kind of society is that? You're going to kick out the Brahmins, you're going to kick out the women, You're going to kick out women who have children. Well, okay, how are you going to have a functioning society without the woman and the children? You need the children to carry on the society. So if you kick out the woman and they have children and they leave and they're gone, then you're missing the children as well. So this is not going to work. It just doesn't work. And I mean, there are people who think that GBC are demons, and they are doing this on purpose to destroy the first and second and even third generation of Vaishnavas by just having them all removed from ISKCON. But anyway, the Brahmins were removed. That's what happened. So the Brahmins were removed, the women were mistreated, the children were not protected, cows ended up in bad shape. So where's the Vedic society if the Brahmins, women and children and cows are not being protected and taken care of? That's a question that's never answered. So Prabhupada said 50% of my work is not done. I need to make a Varnashrama program for ISKCON, which was going to be rural properties. People would be living in the country, and in that situation, the woman could be stay-at-home moms. That would work there in that situation. But ISKCON didn't make these rural property communities. It just didn't happen. Most of them have been disbanded. We had 2 farms in California. They've been sold. The Oklahoma farm has been sold. Gita Nagari is pretty much run down. The Mississippi farms are not doing very well. There really is no rural program going on where a woman can go and take shelter and be a stay-at-home mother. It just doesn't seem to be happening. And there doesn't even seem to be much interest in making that kind of a program. Here in Berkeley we had 2 houses. The temple owned 2 houses for the householders. So the woman would have a place to stay, and maybe they could be stay-at-home moms there. But the GBC, after 1980, they sold those houses. We don't need facility for women and children and families. They just never emphasized that. And instead, the big king gurus had very nice houses for themselves, but the overall community was not being housed. And nor was there much interest in that. So you can't invite women to participate in a Varnashrama Vedic lifestyle unless you have a place for them to go that works. So people like Bhakti Vikas Swami are saying the woman should be subordinate to the man and they should just live like Vedic wives. But Prabhupada's plan was to have these Vedic wives living on a rural property, and this program was never developed. So now instead what we have is Sri Dayananda's program, and he's saying ISKCON has collapsed. He's openly saying ISKCON has collapsed. Well, if ISKCON has collapsed, how can we invite women into a collapsed program? Why would we say you women should come and participate in a collapsed situation? What we should be saying is, let's build something first so that these women have a shelter. They can come and live somewhere. We're going to make rural programs where householders can go and live. So Hridayananda's idea, I hate to say it's true, but it's at least partially true. ISKCON has collapsed, or it has been collapsing over a period of time, and the result is that women have been getting a very bumpy ride in the whole ordeal. They've been kicked out of temples, and when they have bad health, they don't really get support. The leaders have sold the farms where they were supposed to live, sold the houses where they were supposed to live, sold the temples where they were supposed to live, and emptied out the temples where they were living. They just made a declaration, either you're going to worship the deviants that we put on the Vyasasan here in this temple, or you have to leave. And so thousands and thousands of women left the society as a result. So Bhakti Vikas and others are saying the women need to surrender to the men. What if the men are pulling the carpet out from under these women and making their lives unstable and making their lives unlivable and making the temples uninhabitable for anyone, including a lot of these women? So if we're going to have women surrender to the men have to get it together and make a society where the woman can function. That's rule number one. There has to be a functioning place for them to be. And a lot of that just doesn't seem to be happening in the current ISKCON situation at the moment. Women are not being encouraged to participate in the society unless they surrender to a guru, a GBC guru, that may or may not be a bona fide person. But perhaps the worst problem is, what happens if the men of ISKCON, or let's say the remaining men, most of the men left, most of the women left, but the remaining men, what happens if they don't have the discrimination that an ordinary woman on the street has? Then what is the situation? Now, I'll give you an example. In 1986, I was interviewed by a lady who worked for CBS News. She was a news reporter, and she showed me a film of Kirtananda, who was being worshipped by hundreds of men at New Vrindavan, and she said, why are all these men worshipping this plainly, obviously deviant person? So she figured out that Kirtananda was a deviant within, say, 1 second. It took her 1 second to figure this out. Meanwhile, all these men were sitting around scratching their heads. They couldn't figure out what the problem was, including a lot of the GBC leaders. I mean, the GBC leaders had just said in their BTG magazine that Kirtananda is like Jesus, Haridas Thakur, and Prahlad. So the leaders and a lot of the men, quote-unquote, are worshipping Kirtananda. Meanwhile, this woman, who's just a hamburger-eating news lady for the TV show, she immediately says, wait a minute, this is a mess. Why are you guys worshipping this person? But she also said, if this was going on in my church, I would personally go up and pull this guy off of his seat. Even if I would be killed, I would not allow this man to be worshipped in my church. So she not only has, head and shoulders way ahead speed of understanding of these men, quote-unquote men, but she also would put up a fight. She wouldn't allow this to happen in her church. So she even has more what you would call kshatriya spirit. She's more of a warrior than all these men put together. She wouldn't allow this to happen in her church. So what happens if the men become so deteriorated that they, can't even keep up with a woman or even an ordinary woman? An ordinary woman just off the street is thousands of light years ahead of them in realization on critical issues, like who is a acharya and who is a guru. And why is it that Bhakti Vikas has been way behind the curve on just about everything? He seems like he's like the last guy to figure out all these different problems are going on. So he's always catching up to speed. Meanwhile, this woman is way ahead of all these people. She's got this all figured out. You can't worship a deviant like this. It's not a good idea. It's bogus. Shouldn't be done. It should be resisted. It should be stopped. It should be fought against. So when Prabhupada says we need to be subordinate to a man, what kind of man is he talking about? What kind of man is he talking about? We need a man who can be ahead of them in realization, not somebody who's way behind an ordinary hamburger-eating woman. They're not actually men. So we can't be subordinate to a man who's not really capable of being a man. And this is another question we get from time to time. Why is it that there are like homosexual gurus in ISKCON, that many people know they're homosexuals, and so many men are worshipping these homosexual gurus? What is the problem here? Are these real men? What kind of real man worships this kind of a program? So, again, it looks very dubious that this is going on. And a number of women have complained to me about that. They said, why is it that these gay acharyas get so much worship from so many of these men, and meanwhile we get kicked around, we get mistreated? This doesn't look good. They're worshipping some guy who has all kinds of problems. Maybe he's a sexual predator. He's a deviant. He's being worshipped. And while all these deviants are being worshipped in a first-class way, we, the women, are being treated like second-class citizens. So what is the problem here? Now, Jadharani is a good example of a woman, not just any ordinary woman, but one of the first devotee women in ISKCON, and she was mistreated very severely by the so-called men of ISKCON. Very badly. Allegedly, she was beaten up at New Vrindavan, and then she went to Los Angeles, where 3 women attacked her. Now, I do know for sure the attack in Los Angeles happened because I know a devotee who's a friend of mine. He's a karate expert, and he said when the woman attacked Jadharani, he literally had to beat them off. So here we have a situation where women are being beaten up. So where's the protection for the woman? And then people wonder, why aren't women surrendering to ISKCON? Well, just look at Jadharani. And has Jadharani ever been like reinstated back into ISKCON? What's the effort to bring her back, or bring back women like her and many others like her who have been alienated from the situation? Has there been any sort of apology publicly made for mistreating women like this? We don't know of any. Instead, what's happening is that the GBC is worshipping Kirtananda in a big samadhi in Vrindavan. So the guy who orchestrates beatings of women and so many mistreatments of women, messing up their marriages, breaking up their marriages, so many things like that, causing so many problems for so many couples and women, etc., which happened at New Vrindavan. And the person who does all that mistreatment of women, he's glorified and being worshipped even now in a samadhi. So what does that say about the condition of women in ISKCON if the people who orchestrate mistreatment of women, even beatings of women, are being worshipped still, now, today? What does that say about that society? And what does it say about some of the key members of that society, like Bhakti Vikas Swami? So one of the things that has happened with this book by Bhakti Vikas Swami is a number of women have become upset, to say the least, because they had to go out and take care of business, get a job, take care of their children, and their ISKCON man, quote unquote, didn't help them out in many cases, certain cases. So this has been a big problem, which he doesn't really seem to be addressing. What about all the women who didn't get supported by the man, the so-called man, in their ISKCON situation, and the women had to struggle, and still have to struggle, to maintain themselves and their family and so on and so forth? Well, what is he going to do for those people? To simply say that women should stay at home and be subordinate to a man, when these women had to struggle very hard, and a lot of these women went out and did Harinam Sankirtan and book distribution, and they worked very, very hard to build up ISKCON, while a lot of the men were lollygagging around like Satsvarup watching television, watching football. So they were the real workers in many cases who built up the society. And then Bhakti Vikas comes along and says, well, they should just be at home wearing an apron, washing dishes in the kitchen, tending to the baby. That's very unrealistic. And it's actually insulting. Of course, this whole program is insulting the intelligence of women when he starts out by saying women have to worship deviants in order to go back to God. How many women believe that? How many women are going to accept that? It's simply not acceptable, and it's not working, and it's insulting. It's an insult to anyone to say you have to worship a deviant in order to go back to Krishna. And that is why Bhakti Vikas hangs out in India. Because in India, people don't know the history of his whole illicit sex guru program. He doesn't really come to the West because any woman in the West is going to challenge him right away and say, excuse me, aren't you the guys who are putting deviants into your guru seat? So women can defeat him over here. The average woman knows better and will not accept his program. So that is why he's hanging out in India. And I have some recent communication with people in India who said they didn't know a lot of this stuff. And I'm talking now with some people in Ukraine, same thing. They just found out a couple weeks ago that the GBC was up to all these different antics and programs. So they're just not being real with people. And, you know, that's a big part of their problem. They don't have a program that's going to attract intelligent people. And that's why they even say openly now they're going to sell the Brooklyn temple and move that temple to a Hindu area of town where they can just collect money from the Hindus. They're not even trying to appeal to the Westerners anymore, because the Westerners have caught on to their whole bogus program of promoting bogus people as acharyas. So it's all now, it's just about collecting money from the Hindus. They're collecting money from the Hindus in most of the major temples in the United States right now, and in England, and so on. They're not even trying to make an appealing program that's going to work for the Westerners. So they go to Russia, they go to the Ukraine, they go to places where people are unaware of the whole history of their illicit sex acharya program, and how they forced people, banned people, beat people, sometimes had people assassinated who didn't go along with this program. But anyway, it's a good thing that he's addressing some things, some of the problems that are going on in ISKCON. I have to give him a little bit of credit. Like, no one else is willing to stick their head out and say anything about anything. At least he says a few things once in a while about something. But it's too little too late. It's not going to fix anything. The real fix is when the proper worship of the Acharya is reestablished, and the program he wanted, which is Varnashrama Dharma, where women are going to be protected and put into rural properties and this type of thing, that program has to be launched, started, and it has to be functioning and working, and then we can start inviting women into that program. But since there's very little or no interest in even building that type of a program, I don't think it's very good to invite women into that program at the moment. Into the program of worshiping deviants, which is going downhill fast. Anyway, Prabhupada's idea is you have to incorporate the woman, and we have our own independent temples now where women are coming, and the women are doing good. We have a woman kirtan party, you know, at our new Sunnyvale temple, which is doing really nicely. So we're incorporating women and families and babies and the whole thing into a sort of a new version of ISKCON, which is only necessary because these guys are just not going to do that. They're not going to make a society that functions and which gives women an intelligent process of worshiping Krishna, which is that you have to worship the pure devotee. Unless we tell women they have to worship the pure devotee, they're just not going to be attracted, and they're not going to come in any large numbers. And a lot of them are going to remain where they are, alienated and aloof from the ISKCON institution. So I hope this helps, and thanks for listening. Hare Krishna.